Aloha and welcome to Thumbing Through Yesterday, the podcast where we take our favorite books off the shelf, blow the dust off, and remind ourselves why it is we love them. My name's Tom Galley, and joining me today we've got Tony Pasculi.
Happy to be here, Tom.
And today we're taking a look at one of Tony's favorites. What was it again?
This is Hyperion by Dan Simmons.
This is not something I was at all familiar with.
Are you familiar with Dan Simmons in general?
I don't know that I am. Drop a couple of names.
All right. Dan Simmons is a genre-hopping author. He's won Hugos and awards in a number of different genres. He wrote an award-winning horror book called Carrion Comfort. He's written a ton of science fiction, including Hyperion, which won a Hugo Award. He's also most recently written a book, a trilogy of books about a really hard-boiled detective called Joe Kurtz, which are just violent throwback books. They're like kind of old-school detective novels. Yeah, Hard Case, Hard Something, and Hard Something Else, which are wonderful. And he also wrote a sort of fictionalized version of the life of Ernest Hemingway. Oh, and he wrote The Terror, which got turned into a miniseries about Antarctic exploration and some trouble they get into.
Nope.
Yep.
Really, I'm unfamiliar with Dan Simmons.
He's an amazing writer. This guy is so smart. I mean, well, we'll see what your impression of him is. He is so smart. You just feel like, oh my God, I feel like an idiot just trying to keep up with this guy in his book. And Hyperion is just scratching the surface. I mean, the next books in this sequence are just like, yeah. Anyway, this book, I love this book. I've read this book a number of times. And every time I read it, I think I'm a little bit surprised when it comes to the end. But it's a collection of stories by a bunch of people that are on a pilgrimage, and it's a deliberate allusion to Chaucer.
Chaucer's Canterbury Tales.
Canterbury Tales, yeah.
Yeah, we got to the second story. I'm like, okay, this is Canterbury Tales in space.
Yes, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. But the stories are amazing. And yet, there's only two stories that really stick with me, and that's the story about the cruciform and the story about the Merlin baby. Yeah, and the rest are still fascinating, but they just kind of like...
Well, there were three that I more or less enjoyed, and two that were just absolute slogs for me.
Interesting.
The poet's story was, oh my God. What was that, 200 pages that boiled down to... I was a successful poet. I lived a really varied lifestyle. I got writer's block, and then I moved to Hyperion.
Yeah.
I mean, did not, well, whatever. That particular one did not do anything for me. I did not care about the character. I certainly didn't care about his trials and tribulations. And by the time we finally did get to his link to the Shrike, which, oh my God, the Shrike.
The Shrike.
It was tenuous at best, you know?
It is and it isn't. The whole thing, there's this, I mean, okay, it's weird, but we've got this planet which has these time tombs on it, which maybe are artifacts from our distant future traveling backwards in time to our current, where they will open and something horrible will happen, or wonderful, we don't know. Because they don't open in this book.
Yeah. Well, no, they are open. I like the fact they keep talking about they will open. But in fact, the time tubes have been standing open since their discovery, open and empty.
Yes.
So what they actually mean is the time tubes are going to be closing soon, but immediately before they close, whoever pillaged them, which will be us, will see what was actually in there. Yeah. Right.
And then we also have the Shrike, which is this creature named after an actual bird. There's a bird called a shrike, and it captures insects and it sticks them on thorn bushes. It sticks the insects on a thorn bush so it can have fresh meat for later, and it goes back and eats it later. And that's what this thing does. This is a humanoid creature with 4 arms, and it takes people and it stabs them on its thorn tree where they suffer until they die. Yeah, in the midst of all this, there's this poet who is central to this book, even though his story is kind of weird and rambly. And this other poet, John Keats, who is also weirdly very tied up in the mythos of Hyperion. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he wrote a poem called Hyperion. I don't read poetry.
Yeah,
so.
I kept thinking I really ought to go back and look at this Keats poem Hyperion because they won't let go of the references to it. But yeah, I didn't quite get around to it.
The references get more intense in later books. Yeah. I will say. Yeah.
But we're kind of jumping in the middle, and that's
Okay,
fine.
okay,
That's
okay.
fine. But
Tell me, so there were another one that you didn't care for at all.
okay, help me think my way through this. We have the tale of the
So first we got the tale of the priest.
priest,
That's
which is
the
the one where he
cruciform.
picks up the cruciform
Yes.
parasite,
And then we
which I
get
have some issues with. But that was a compelling story.
yeah. And then we have the tale of the soldier who's the guy who's fighting in battle simulations who meets a girl in dreams.
Okay, that was a fun read, but wow, did they go out of our way to throw 3 climaxes at us?
Yeah.
You know, because he gets saved, and then the world gets pulled out from under his feet, and then he gets saved, and the world gets pulled out from under him again.
Yeah.
And yet here he is with us. So,
Yeah.
charmed life, yeah.
And then the third one is Saul Weintraub and his daughter Rachel.
Oh my, that was heartbreaking.
Yes.
I actually highlighted a passage in there just with the note OMG, because I read it and I teared up a little bit.
It's devastating. It's I don't have kids, but this is a man whose child goes off, and because of the science fiction universe in which they live, every time they travel they accrue time debt, and so she goes away to do some research, and they know that it's going to be 8 years before they see her again, and she'll be basically the same age, and they'll be 8 years older. And that's heartbreaking all by itself.
Yeah.
But then she gets into this accident into the time tombs and starts aging backwards. And they just watch her every day lose a day of memory.
This is 51st States meets Benjamin Buttons.
Yeah. Oh, it's brutal. It is brutal. I'm curious what passage you highlighted, because I highlighted something in here too.
Well, I don't even need to look at it. So one of the things this young lady is just endearing, but every time she leaves someone she cares about, she says, "Later, alligator." And they say,
yeah.
"Wild crocodile." So it's gotten to the point where she's a child again, and she's living at home with her parents, and then her mom dies, and she doesn't remember her mom dies.
Yeah.
But still, every night when she's going to sleep, as her dad is walking in the room, she says, "Later, alligator." He says, "Wild crocodile." And then one night he tucks her in and he walks out, and she doesn't say anything. So he turns around and he says, "Later, alligator." And she says, "What?"
Yeah, he has to teach her.
And my heart just cracked. Oh my God. He's got nothing left of her now,
Yeah, yeah. The line that got to me, I don't remember it from a previous incarnation, is "If it becomes too much, come."
Yes.
So he's once news of his daughter's condition becomes well known, they live in a world with Farcaster portals, and anybody can go to any planet at any time for very little cost. And so it is impossible to escape the press. It is impossible to have any privacy, and these people are destroying their lives and what little time they have left with their daughter, who's rapidly shrinking to nothing. And they go to basically a kibbutz at a Jewish settled planet, which is private. It only has one Farcaster portal, and so they maintain privacy, and there they can live undisturbed for a while. And just that offer is just kind of like, yeah. All right, so
so the next one has to be the poet.
no, poet was second, right? No, next one has to be the poet. We've got priest, soldier, scholar, poet.
Right. And that one was just, it was self-indulgent. It was pretentious. It didn't do anything. It didn't go anywhere. And I felt like when it finally got around to a tie-in, I was thoroughly dissatisfied. I had to wade through so much crap to get to such a tenuous tie-in.
What I enjoyed about it on this read, because it didn't really stick with me on previous reads, and I think it is a critical tie-in to the whole, to everything he's trying to do with the book. But what I did appreciate is, you say was self-indulgent, the poet is self-indulgent. It's a really excellent style exercise the way in which this story is told is so different from the way in which any of the other stories are told, because it's the poet who's telling his own story. And he tells it out of order and is disoriented, and he makes himself the hero, and the language is ridiculously overwrought. And it's like, of course, because he's a poet. Yeah. So, but all the all the caveats you mentioned definitely apply. It's
Yeah.
overlong, it's overindulgent, and it's the fact that it's a wonderful exercise in style doesn't really make up for the fact that it's a little bit tedious. Yeah.
A little bit tedious. It is definitely a little bit tedious.
So then we have, we're supposed to have Het Mastein's story, but he disappears
Maybe did, maybe not.
mysteriously. And so then we get the detective story.
That was a fun story, and I was kind of on pins and needles going through it. But as we're obviously getting to the end of it, I'm like, how is this possibly going to tie into, and then the entire reason it ties in is because it's not an android. What do they call it?
Cybrid.
The Cybrid is a Keats.
Yeah.
It's generated from Keats, which is the name that Hyperion came from. His poem is where the name,
Yes.
the sad King Billy called the planet Hyperion, which apparently was not its official name, but has become it's like Dune, right?
Yeah.
Nobody calls it Arrakis. Everybody calls it Dune. And I'm curious as to where that's going to go.
Yeah, that is fascinating. What I love about that story initially puts me off because it's so far in the future, and it's like someone killed me, but of course I'm still here. I was only offline for a second, but I'm a Cybrid, so that was an eternity for me, and da 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 da. And the detective is throwing out all these theories, and he just goes, "Nope, that couldn't possibly be it." It's like, dude, you have no idea what it is.
Yeah, he was a bit dismissive of things that he had no reason to be dismissive of.
One, stop saying that. And two, Dan Simmons, we don't know what's possible and what's not. And this is really annoying. The technology was so... The detective techniques and the technology were just like at different scales. And so it's just like, I'm just adrift here.
Yeah.
But eventually we catch up. Eventually the world building takes over.
Eventually we do. And I mean, I love the fact that we've got a Sam Spade character here,
Yes,
or a Matt Helm character here. It's the hard-boiled gumshoe. Although she happens to have at her disposal image-changing technology and spores that she can use to track people with ultraviolet light and stuff like that. And I don't know. I mean, I've only read this one book. I don't know if we're going to circle back around to this in later books or not. But she gets conflicting information about what is possible in terms of this personality restoration thing.
Yes.
She's assured by every human expert she talks to, which is two of them, that it can't be done, that the personality resurrection will never be stable, but they cannot put it into a physical body. They couldn't make a Cybrid out of it. And you've got the Cybrid walking around pretending to be, a personality resurrection of Keats. Yeah. So I kept hoping they would exploit that somehow, and he's not what he thinks he is, type of deal. But, no. Or at least if that's going to happen, it didn't happen in this book.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, because I've read the next book and the next two, and I don't remember what happens in the next book at all. We'll talk about that more. And then we get one more story. So we skipped Het Mastein's story because he goes missing. And then we get the story of, and that's a shame because he has a Mobius cube with a creature in it. Kind of curious what his story is.
Well, that's what they think is in it.
Oh, that's true. We don't know what's in it.
We don't know. Yeah. Or maybe the consul knows because he admits he was in the room and it was unsealed, but he says all he did was turn the seal back on.
Yeah.
But he says a lot of things.
Yeah. And then we get the consul story, which is weird.
It is weird. They print, I don't know about yours, but in my Kindle version, they printed the whole thing in italics, which just annoys me.
Yeah.
My eyes are less than they used to be, and I never liked reading italics, even when I was a kid.
No, italics are for emphasis. If you emphasize everything, nothing's emphasized.
Exactly. It's almost the opposite. But I mean, it was fascinating in that he came up with this lengthy and convoluted series of events. Oh my God, the idea of trying to carry on a shipboard, a romance between a shipman and a groundbound person. Yes. Man, Dan Simmons really explores this concept of time debt in that story.
Yeah.
And wow, was that poignant. You've got the 16-year-old kid meets a 16-year-old girl, and then the 17-year-old kids with the 26-year-old woman, and then the 18-year-old kids with a 40-something, and the last time he sees her, he's a young adult and she's 70-something.
Yeah, and he's got kids that are older than he is. Yeah. Kids and grandkids. Yeah. because he gets this woman pregnant at one point. Yeah. So, yeah. There were parts of that story that were really poignant and really interesting. And then there are parts, but it's all told out of order, which is found very annoying.
Frustrating. You have to really work at untangling it. And then there are a couple of things about it that I just don't buy. The setup he gives us, I don't think is adequate for the level of his, I'm just going to say terrorism, that he goes with at the end.
That's
but
fair.
Also, they don't give us any hint how he's capable of doing this act of terrorism. Somehow he gets close enough to the construction of this pinnacle of technology that the entire, do you say hegemony or hegemony?
I say hegemony.
So do I.
Okay. But, yeah.
I love that word.
Yeah.
But anyway, somehow he manages to do this, to infiltrate that, to plant a micro-explosive on it, so that it goes kaboom in a stunningly satisfying way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't see that that somebody of his rank, retired consul, would have been allowed that kind of access. But whatever. I mean, okay, we have to swallow that for the story to unfold, right?
Well, he's getting extraordinary levels of access because he's a triple agent. Like one side is using him against the other, and they're like, okay, because they think you're with them, we're going to let you in so that you can, but you're actually working for us. He's telling the other side the same thing. And in point of fact, he's not working for either of the two sides that think he's betraying the other.
Yeah.
He's working for himself to betray them both. So he does have some...
Yeah, but to what end is unclear to me.
Just revenge. He's the Captain Nemo of this story. Yeah. Yeah, someone hurt him, and now he's going to destroy the world. He's going to murder millions, if not billions, of people because he's upset. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
So anyway, we get through all 7 of these stories, which constitute 6 of these stories, which constitute the vast majority of the book.
yeah.
And it doesn't end. I don't know if we thought about this going into it. We picked 2 books back to back that don't have endings.
I did not think about that at the time, but
I didn't remember mine. So.
It did become clear to me as I listened to the epilogue on the way over the hill to come to this on audiobook. It's like, oh yeah, that's how it ends. I remember the first time I read this book, I was just like frantic to know what happens next. And the second book had been printed, but I finished it like at 10 o'clock at night and all the bookstores were closed. And I had to wait till the next day to find the sequel. And I was just like, I've got to get up as early as possible and drive to the store. This is before Kindles, and buy this book. And again, I can't remember a thing that happens in the second book, but I can tell you this. It doesn't immediately start by telling you what happens at the end of this book. Yeah. And then they got to the time tombs and then this happened. No, it doesn't. It's just like, let me take you back. Let me take you back.
At no point has this thing been direct. I think I even made a comment in here at some point. Is Rorschach's journal much? One of the stories was told in that same, abstract imagery thing. And I don't think it was the poet's story. I think it was before I'd gotten to the poet's story I made that comment.
All right, so we glossed over the priest story, which you said you had an issue with. This is my favorite story in the book, is the priest story. I love the priest story. I'm glad that it's first. It's the one that stands out to me the most from this. When I think of Hyperion, I think of the Shrike, and then I think of the priest story.
Okay.
And it's stunning to me how you can write a horror story that long and that effective and that mysterious that it pays off. And it's like, oh my God, that is legitimately horrible. Horrible, horrible, horrible.
Yep.
But you had a quibble with it. What was your quibble?
Oh, I don't even remember at this point.
Oh, okay.
Let's see. So a double-edged quibble here. The initial priest who made the trek out there, who made the discoveries of the 70, and was given the first symbiote, parasite, whatever it was.
Yeah, the cruciform.
The cruciform. Could not leave. He was physically incapable. It would torture him, and when torturing him wasn't enough, it would knock him unconscious, take control of his body, and return him. So he finds enough agency and enough pain tolerance to find that magic threshold where he's one step away from being knocked unconscious and then nail himself to a Tesla tree so that he'll be electrified for eternity. But
Yeah.
he has woven, they happen to have a material growing there, a plant growing there, which is asbestos-like. They even call it bestos. He has woven a completely environmentally sound, flame-proof bag into which he puts his notes that during the decades that he's hanging there, they don't burn, they don't get hot, they don't mold. Insects wouldn't get dead because he's been electrocuted constantly. But, you know,
That was
anyway.
your quibble, the notes?
Huh?
Your quibble was the notes, that the notes
No.
survived? Oh,
But,
okay.
so, I mean, he manages to go through all this.
Yeah.
And then what happens? Another member of the clergy actually finds his body,
Yeah.
pulls him down, retrieves the notes, successfully kills him by removing the shrike,
Yeah.
or the shrike, the parasite,
Yeah.
and then escapes.
Yeah.
And then in the dramatic reveal later, we find out that he's infected,
He's doubly infected.
which is a WTF question. Why is he doubly infected? And the only thing I can come up with is he got deliberately infected by the locals, and then he picked up the secondary infection when he pulled his friend down off the tree.
It's not answered, so it's
not,
mysterious.
but I mean, he doesn't address it. The consul tortures him after a while, and then the consul says, "And where's the second parasite on your back?"
Yeah.
And then there's no confirmation. There's a look. You know,
Yeah.
the priest looks up at him, but the priest is in seizure-inducing agony at the moment. So, you know, I lit my comment. There was WTF question mark. So
My take on that was that the 70, that the priest didn't get away fast enough. The 70 caught up with him, and they said, "Oh, you're of the cruciform. Let's do the thing. We'll give you one. Oh, you managed to kill this guy. No one can really die. No one can ever die the true death once they are of the cruciform. So we'll give you his too." And then, you know, one of the reasons he's in agony is because if you get away from the epicenter, you're in agony because the thing punishes you for getting too far away.
right.
But I think another reason he's in agony is that his body is slowly splitting into two. Yeah.
Which the first priest hypothesized,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
They had somebody get injured to the point where it was easier to make a new one. So
Yeah.
they slapped his cross on somebody else, which he never actually saw work. It's just what he thought would happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I don't know how the guy wearing two crosses got away and then
Yeah.
has been successfully functioning in society for the decades since that discovery, waiting for the opportunity to go back and have this pilgrimage.
Drugs. The answer is drugs. Lots and lots of drugs.
Yeah, I'm skeptical
it's a
he would
stretch.
survive it.
It's a stretch. But I still, this story is so amazing for God, it just succeeds on so many levels for me.
There's a lot there, and you're right. He manages to keep a level of tension. Surprisingly, even during the early part of the story, when basically the story is I'm stuck in huts and they won't let me leave.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of
But
tension
there's something
there.
going on, right? There's
Yeah.
like, why won't they? What is this secret ritual they're doing? And what is this distinction they keep making between the cross and the cruciform? And they won't answer any of his questions. And they don't. And also, why don't they seem to have any gender? And we learn the horrifying answer to that later, which is they're basically just being sort of softened like wax as they get perpetually reincarnated, so they
Yep.
lose their features and distinguishing marks until they're barely human at all anymore. It's just it's an absolute nightmare. It's so good. Yeah, it's one of the most horrifying stories I've ever read.
It's creepy. No doubt about that.
Plus, it's got in addition to the sheer body horror of it and existential dread, it's got two of the main characters are priests, and they're priests. The first one is a priest who's had his face shaken, and he's trying to, the Catholic Church is on the wane, and he thinks he has found proof of Catholicism being universal, having a life beyond earth, because here's this miraculous thing,
Right.
Yeah, and it's not a miracle; it's a nightmare. Sorry, Catholic priest. Yeah. It's incredible.
That was pretty cool. I highlighted a passage out of that story. He's on his way to, the first priest is on his way to Hyperion, and they send a young priestlet along with him. He says, "I presume you're going down to do some mission work?" "Not at all," replied Father Duray. The good people of Hyperion have done nothing to foist their religious opinions on me, so I see no reason to offend them by proselytizing.
Yeah.
Yes! I approve of that attitude.
Yeah. The Catholic Church it's amazing that it exists at all that far in the future. It's barely hanging on. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, we just kind of dove into this thing, but one of the things that really impressed the heck out of me on this book was the prologue. It is just dense with world building and new ideas and concepts, and there is just so much to unpack in the prologue as to what the hell is he talking about? What are all these things? What's a Shrike? That sounds intriguing. What is the hegemony? What is this? What is that? What does it mean that this thing happened? So, I mean, that prologue, it's the sort of thing that if I was looking for a book to read and, flipped it open and read the first dozen pages, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm leaving with this book.
It's good. I know when I was younger, I'm less so this way. When I was younger, like when I was very young, we talked about this last episode, I would read just nonfiction books. It's like, tell me about every kind of fish there is. Yeah. And when I discovered science fiction, I was like, oh yeah, just throw me into the deep end. Just bring out all your techno jargon in the first page and let me just kind of go, wow, what's happening here? I'm sure I'll figure it out at some point. I'm less into that now. I want recognizable characters who are doing stuff right off the bat and not a whole bunch of world building on page one. But this is dense, and the world building in this book is amazing. It is insane, and it has throwbacks to so many other novels and genres, and it's just, it's incredible.
Yeah, there were a couple of Romeo and Juliet references in there.
The
sword fight between Mercutio and Tybalt was in there.
Yeah, the guy gets stabbed under his arm. Yeah.
Except there was a laser pin involved, which changed things at the end. But
there are references to, I don't know, have you read any William Gibson?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a whole in the hard-boiled detective story.
Yep.
It turns into a hard-boiled cyberpunk story.
Yeah, there's a lot of cyberpunk in there.
There's a reference to Cowboy Gibson, this legendary hacker, and the whole thing has got shades of Johnny Mnemonic and Burning Chrome to it. It's a lot of fun.
Yep. So there were a couple of slogs for me. I didn't realize I was getting into the Canterbury Tales, and honestly, the ending was so anti-ending that I kind of want to know what happens next, but I'm not willing to go through this again to find out.
Yeah, I think the second book is worth reading. That's my memory. My memory is the second book is worth reading, but I don't think it will be satisfying in the way that you hope it will be with the ending of this book.
Well, at this point, my assumption is that I'm going to read all three books and not
get four.
All four books, and not get the closure I'm looking for.
Yeah.
That it's going to be one of that type of thing. That even if he does deign to close all these questions, that's only going to actually prove to be the portal to something even more grand and more puzzling.
Yeah, that's sort of my impression. It's like, oh, you thought you want to know the answer to this? Wait till I give you this mystery. Like, no,
right.
I want to know the answer to that. Nope, can't have that either. Yeah.
But the Shrike, the time tombs.
All right, did you read this on Kindle or in paperback?
Kindle.
Okay, what did your cover look like? Was it just that dull sort of particle swarm?
Yeah, it's... Right, that's the tail page.
Yeah. Okay, same. That's an unfortunate reissue, that cover. And there's sort of a debate happening on Twitter right now about reissues of covers of classic science fiction novels. And this is just the most abstract and geometric thing. It's beautiful, it's pretty, but it's abstract. And I don't know if you've ever seen the original cover, but the original cover is a long shot of Hyperion with the Shrike in the foreground and the time tombs in the background. And you look at this and go, holy shit, what's going on in this? I want to read that book. This book looks like a calculus book. Yeah.
One of the issues that I've had when we're doing this podcast, I do put together artwork for each episode, and I try to find the original cover of whatever novel we're talking about. And I can't always find an image of the original cover, but as I'm looking for them, I'm stunned at the range. You'll take a Niven, which originally had some beautiful science fiction artwork, from the 70s that looked like beautiful science fiction artwork from the 70s. And now it's like a page of blue with 2 dots in the corner.
Yeah, sorry, podcast listeners, you can't see this, but go to Google and Google original cover for Hyperion. It is gorgeous and compelling.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that Shrike is nowhere near intimidating enough.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, he's not, but he's still interesting.
Yep, he is still interesting.
He has, half the number of arms that he should have, for one thing. Yeah. But
I read an article somewhere about the cover art of the original pulp magazines. And by and large, the art was created independently from the stories. So they actually just had an inventory of art, and they said, hey, doesn't that story have a rocket ship and a planet with rings? There's a piece of art that has a rocket ship and a planet with rings.
If even that much, yeah. It's like, oh, you've got a hero, let's give him a girl and a blaster, yeah?
Yep.
Put a spacesuit on him so we know it's in space, and boom, done. It's like, wait, there's no girl in this story. He's not shooting anything. Yeah.
Yep. This is a big idea book.
Yeah, so many big ideas. There's so many big ideas that, all right, like the Farcaster portals. We're both fans of Niven. Mm-hmm. Have you read any of his flash mob stories?
Doesn't ring a bell.
So in Ring World, we have the stepping discs.
Yep.
Right, on the Puppeteer planet. And they are basically the teleport booths. I forget what they're called. But on wherever Louis Wu comes from, his home planet, they have these like phone booths where you can dial a number and zap to another phone booth. And so Niven very astutely predicts that if this technology actually exists, then if something interesting is happening somewhere, everybody's going to show up because it's free and it's cheap and there is no obstacle.
Right.
Yeah. And so you're going to get things called flash mobs. And he's written a series of stories on how to deal with flash mobs. And some of them happens like they're discovering this problem in real time and figuring it out. And then some of them are later on where they just, either they just disable a booth that's at a hot spot, or they allow you to pop through, but the bottom of the booth opens up and you drop directly into prison.
That's a good one.
But it's an amazing idea. That it's the kind of thing that people don't always anticipate the second order effects of a technology, and Niven does a really, really good job with that. Yeah. And Simmons hints at it here. There's a line somewhere which I highlighted. News traveled almost instantaneously through the mega data sphere of 160 web worlds. To scratch the curiosity itch, one had only to pass a universal card across a Terminex disky and step through a Farcaster. So that's the only hint he makes of this. And that and the press swarming Saul when he becomes news.
Well, I mean, that is behind, or one of the many things behind the console's act of treason, right? Because it's he's the kid. Okay, actually, there's more of a tie-in there than I realized. Right, his grandfather was the kid who was there when they started building the Farcast gate.
Yeah.
Which took a while to get up and running, and then a while longer before they were willing to turn it on. But the kid tells the girl, what's
going to happen
to her
planet.
He's like, by the time it's been here 5 years, you probably have 20 or 30 million people a year visiting.
Yeah.
Or 40, 50 million people a year.
And she's like, what about the Motul Islands? They have these living islands that travel around.
Oh, those are going to get developed.
Yeah.
And we're going to drill for oil in the shallow sea where they spawn.
We're going to break up the smaller islands and, yeah.
Yep. And then that's the root of the terrorist plot. But it's also, like you said, it's an insight into how this technology is destructive.
Yes. That's interesting. The other thing, hint, this is one of the few things I remember from the next book. But so there's a saying in software, which is never build your business on someone else's platform. Okay. If you're starting a software business and your software business is developing plugins for Adobe Illustrator, Adobe can change that interface at any time, and there goes your plugin business. Yeah, you'd be much better off developing your own software that you control the distribution of the platform, and it can't be yanked out from under you at a moment's notice. Yeah,
we talked about that in Lords of Doom, Masters of Doom.
Masters of Doom, yes. Yeah. So the Farcaster technology, which ties together the web of worlds, is run by the Technocore, not by human beings. So they have built not only their entire interplanetary hegemony on basically an alien intelligence's cooperation. And we get hints here that maybe they're not being so cooperative anymore. Maybe they're going to declare war on human beings and wipe them all out. And meanwhile, there are people who have houses where every room is on a different world.
Yep.
It's going to be disastrous for humanity if that network goes away. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Now that Technocore and the three camps of the AI. I mean, that had to see that coming. But and of course we get hints. Not only are the AIs playing humanity against the ousters, but we get hints that they're in contact with other intelligences out there.
Yes.
But one of our characters is having this conversation with the CEO of the hegemony.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that the ruling body is the person is the CEO. And she basically becomes dismissive of the fact that their entire civilization is in the hands of the AIs. Yeah. She's like, but what could we do about it? We can't do anything about it. There's nothing we can do about it, so we're just going to go with it.
Yeah, it's a don't look up scenario. It's like I don't know. There's a disappointing but intriguing Scalzi trilogy, and I know you read Old Man's War, where he posits a sort of river in space-time that means you can travel at super light speeds between planets, but only if you can find the shoals and sort of navigate this river effectively. And then you can enter it and zip to another place and exit it and be where you want to be. And so the worlds that they have chosen to colonize are the worlds that are very easily tied together by this river. And then someone discovers that the river is going to change course and shrink. And a lot of these worlds are going to just be cut off from the rest of civilization. And, they're going to be hundreds and hundreds of light years away. And basically, they're going to go extinct.
It sounds really familiar.
It's such an incredible premise, though. And it reminds me of this Farcaster tying together the web of worlds.
Currents in space?
The Interdependency series.
No, that's not the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
I feel like there was a similar idea that was floated by Niven or one of the other grandfathers of sci-fi, but it was in the form of like either a single novel or a lengthy short story. But it was a story of a world dealing with the fact it used to be an industrial center, a pivotal hub, but the hyperspace lanes had drifted away from it. So it was becoming irrelevant and obsolete.
Interesting. Yeah, that sounds Asimovian.
Maybe so.
Like part of Foundation or something. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, it doesn't ring a bell. Okay.
Listeners, if you know what we're talking about, leave a comment on the Facebook page or the Instagram or on Spotify.
Yeah. All right. So anything else on Hyperion? I think I said everything I wanted to say, which was...
this book, there were chunks of it that didn't agree with me, but overall, I mean, wow. Big ideas, incredible world building, not one, but 7 incredibly convoluted plots, interdependent on each other.
Yeah.
It's
intense.
It's phenomenal. I mean, just looking at it structurally, it's quite an accomplishment.
Even the parts where they're not just like immediately satisfying, you step back and go, Dan Simmons, you mad genius. How did you pull this off?
How long was this thing?
500 pages.
It felt like a long read, but part of that was because it's not something you could breeze through. It took thinking while I was reading.
Yeah.
And I'm not completely satisfied that I understand the motivations of the console there at the end. Might have to go back and reread that section.
Yeah.
I wonder if I can copy paste it into a text document and de-italicize it.
It should be an option in Kindle. It probably isn't, though.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm glad it did this. I probably will break down and read the next one, just because I really, really, really want to know more about what's going on with those time tombs and the Shrike.
So there's sort of 4 books, but the first 2 books are like a pair, and then the next 2 books are a later pair. So I think the first 2 are intended to stand alone. I think the second book is called The Fall of Hyperion, and that ends that story. But then there's 2 more books set in the same universe, Endymion and the Rise of Endymion. Yeah.
Cool.
And I will warn you going in, there's even more poetry ahead. like Keats is just all over the next 3 books. Yeah.
All right. I will admit that I basically skipped every poem in there. I read maybe the first stanza or 2, saw where the poem was going, and then turned page. It's like the Tolkien descriptions. It's like, okay, he's going to talk about Pretty Lothlorien for 3 pages now. Flip, flip, flip. Okay, now we're back to plot.
Yeah. It's an amazing book. I love it. I love it. I don't love all of it equally, but I definitely love it.
Yeah. I can see coming back to this.
Yeah. All right. What's next?
Well, we're going to go for something a little bit more lighthearted and hopefully delightful. Who Goes Here by Bob Shaw.
Yeah, I've read some Bob Shaw, but I've never even heard of this book, so I'm intrigued.
I'm looking forward to your reactions there. All right. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks.